to me, my precious child. I've called your name. Nothing can take you from my hand. I'm still the same.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to our latest instalment, which is going to be a Palm Sunday instalment. Now, before we get to that, you may remember that in 1993, we had the Grand National that never was. This year, we've had a virtual Grand National. It's one where they've computerised it, they've digitised it, they created a whole race, and they used the algorithms to work out what the event and what the result may have turned out like. Now, I don't know if you watched it, or I don't know even if you managed to guess, along with the computers, what the outcome was. But even if you didn't, even if you missed it or decided not to bother, I'm sure by the mere mention of the name Grand National that you'll be able to conjure the scenes in your mind as to what the whole event looked like. And it's very familiar to most of us, whether we're horse racing fans or not. Now, the same can be said of Palm Sunday. The same can be true of Palm Sunday. I'm sure that if you were asked to imagine the scenes in Palm Sunday, you'd have a pretty good idea of what that looked like. You'd probably imagine the cheering crowds waving palm branches. You'd probably imagine the celebrations and the cheering and the shouting. You might imagine the fact that it's a hot and dusty country, and so there'll be clouds of dust everywhere. In that place, you might see in the distance the city of Jerusalem appearing. And of course, in the middle of all of this, you will probably imagine Jesus riding on a donkey, coming towards Jerusalem and entering the city. Even if Jesus somehow or other happens to look like Robert Powell, I'm sure you could conjure up all of those sort of images for Palm Sunday. However, today, what I want to focus on is a funny little kind of conversation that happens right towards the end of Luke's account of Palm Sunday and their events in his gospel. And it's something like this: as the people are doing all those things we just imagined, the teachers of the law, the religious leaders called the Pharisees, for some reason or other, they've got a bit of a cob on. They're having a bit of a miserable moment in the middle of all this celebrating and rejoicing. And they turn around to Jesus and say something like, Teacher, tell your people to shut up. Tell them to stop singing and dancing and celebrating. Tell them it's out of order. This is religion. We don't have fun in religion, so tell them to be quiet, will you? And Jesus turns at him. You can imagine he's got a big grin on his face, and he says something like this. He says, if the people are quiet, then the stones themselves will cry out. If the people are quiet, then the stones themselves will cry out. And it's an interesting comment, this, because the Pharisees are trying to be killjoys, and yet Jesus wants his people to celebrate, to rejoice, and to be happy in the middle of this current situation. But that little phrase that he uses is a bit of a cast back to something that comes out of the Old Testament. Now, there's a song in Christ Church that has been sung there for many years, and we've sung it quite a few times since I've been there. I have to say, though, I think it's fair to say we've sung it rather slowly on occasions. Need to judge that one up a little bit, so mental note for later. But the song is this, and you'll be pleased to know that I'm not going to sing it. But the words go like this: You shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace, and the mountains and the hills will break forth before you. There'll be shouts of joy, and the trees of the field shall clap their hands. And that little chorus song is basically lifted straight out of Isaiah in the Old Testament, from chapter 55, verses 12 to 13. And what it's referring to at that point in time is this: God's people during that point in history had abandoned their God. They turned their backs on their God. And it would seem as a result of this, they had been taken into captivity, they'd been taken into slavery, they'd been taken over by another nation and dragged away from their homeland. So they're far away from home, they're separated from home, they're distant from home and to an extent each other and their families. And they find themselves in this situation where they're totally dejected. They feel like their faith and their hope has been completely trampled on. However, God says to them, in the middle of this situation you find yourselves, I will not abandon you. I will not leave you desolate, and I will not be unfaithful to you like you have been unfaithful to me. And he gives them this song of hope, if you like, a song that they can use when they ultimately will return back to their own nation, back to their capital city, back to where the temple was, in the centre of the city, in the centre of their nation, the place where God, in their minds, resided and was very present among them in that place. God gives them that song, but basically says, if you won't celebrate and rejoice, even in your current circumstances, if you won't offer praises and worship in the situation you find yourselves now, then the mountains, the valleys, the trees, the whole of creation will do that for you. And there's a sense in which that's what Jesus, on Palm Sunday, was reiterating to those religious teachers that were having a bit of a monk on. That phrase used somewhere, I think it was Nottingham where I heard that one, having a monk on. Anyway, and Jesus throws that back at these so-called killjoy Pharisees at that moment in time. And the truth for us is this: we might find ourselves in something of a foreign land. We might feel like we're being held captive at this time in our own homes. We may feel distant from friends and relatives, and even our faith may have felt distanced because we can't meet together in our church building. However, in the middle of all that, if we are a people of faith, then we should have a wider perspective on life and what life can bring and what life has. And that even in these difficult circumstances, we have things we can celebrate. We have things we can rejoice about. We have things we can give thanks for. And so basically, our faith takes us beyond these next few days, next few weeks, next few months, as difficult as they may be. Our faith gives us a wider and a broader and a greater perspective, because it not only talks about life in the future and hope for the future, but it also talks about life eternal beyond this life as well. So as we come to this week, which is called Holy Week, leading up to Easter and all the celebrations that come with Easter Day, to get to that point, we might have to go through a Good Friday experience first. We may feel like we're going through a Good Friday experience even now. But the one thing about the Good Friday experience is that Easter Day comes, and our Easter Day will come as well. So we do have things to be thankful for, to rejoice about, and to celebrate. But the point is, if we don't, creation will. Because at this moment in time, in this beginning of a spring season, we see, as I look out my window now, buds of leaves appearing on trees, flowers and buds are beginning to appear. And if we don't rejoice at this point in time, then in the next few days, weeks and months, creation certainly will, and there will be a riot of celebration among creation. We've already seen something of that with daffodils, I guess, and the bloom that they bring. So if we don't rejoice, creation will. And that's what Jesus pointed out to those miserable Pharisees in the middle of the Palm Sunday celebrations that were happening around him at that point in time. We've got more to come over the next week or so. We've got events during Holy Week that are going to take place. Do check out our website, ccpadgate.co.uk, and also the Facebook page, which is Christ Church Padgate, for all the things that are coming up, and for things that if you want to catch up on, that's where you can also find them. So take care once again, and look forward to seeing you soon.
My shackles you tossed away. My sin is so far away, as far as the east from the west. Though battles may still